Welcome back, legends. What's going on? My name's Kurt Rosie. This is Supreme TV, and today we're talking enduros, boys. How to get prepared, what you need, and how to be the best. Let's get into it. I want to thank everyone again. I know I say this at the start of pretty much every video. Love that I've seen recently on the channel is amazing, and I can't thank you guys enough. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. It means a lot, and we're really pushing to get to 500 subscribers. I'm going to try and keep this very brief, although I know endurance racing can cover a lot of different areas. I am going to go into a few different things, but I'm trying to keep it succinct so you guys can just get the information you need and get back onto the track. That's the main aim of this channel, is quick information so that you can get what you need so you can get straight back out there and keep practicing. When you're starting out with endurance racing, there is one key thing: survival. That's it. Doesn't matter how fast you are, doesn't matter how slow you are, doesn't matter how many people you have in your team. All that matters is that you make it to the end of the race. That's the key. There are too many things that can go wrong by trying to be too fast, driving at 110%, and these shouldn't be your goals. You should be aiming to just survive at least your first few enduros. Then once you start to understand the process, start to understand, how to manage the full endurance, that's when you can start looking at how do we actually win this thing. But at first, survival is key. Endurance racing is about patience, and you'll know this when you go into your first endurance race, and the first few laps will be the biggest test of anything you ever do in iRacing, and you will need to be patient. There's no point making silly moves on the first lap of a 12 or 24 hour race. It doesn't make any sense. Now, before we go any further, there are two things that you need to help you get the most out of your endurance racing. Firstly, a telemetry logger. Something like Garage61 is something I've used for a very long time. It's been a fantastic tool leading up to enduros. You can even create your own team, invite people so that you can see and compare all your different times, fuel burn, average lap time. Amazing that it's still free. Cannot believe it. And secondly, you need some sort of Stint calculator, fuel calculator, team management, Excel document, sheet, napkin if you want to draw it on a napkin. There's a few out there. I've linked 3 down below. The first one is a website that I just recently found. It's very basic, but it does tell you a lot of information that you might need throughout the enduro in terms of fuel burn, your last stint, because the last stint is your main issue. The second one is a very basic Google Sheets stint calculator. It's helped me a fair bit to sort of understand how long a stint's going to be, when we should pit. But also then there's the third one that is the mother of all endurance Excel spreadsheet calculators, made by someone I think called Sassy, Sassy Enduro Google Sheet. It's phenomenal. It can do so much. I still haven't fully wrapped my head around the whole thing, but it's fantastic for people in different time zones. So if you're doing a 24-hour race and you've got 2 people in a different time zone, you've got another person in a different time zone, and then you can put in block out times and when you're open and when when you're sleeping and all that kind of stuff. It's fantastic. So those are in the description below. Use at least one of them. That online calculator is probably one of the best that I've seen for very simple. Just plug your lap time, plug your fuel burn in, and it'll give you and the race length and stuff like that, and it will give you a pretty good breakdown of what you need to do. Endurance Racing 101. Stop talking with your hands, Kurt. Now, if you've never done an iRacing endurance event, they can be a little bit complicated to join. There are a few videos online. I think there's one by iRacing that will show you the process of how to join a race as a team and then join that team as a driver. Register as a driver. And also, just while we're on the topic of that, if your team is in the race and there's someone racing and you want to leave and go and practice in another session. You can withdraw from that as long as someone's in the team in the race session. You can leave, withdraw, go and do some practice, come back, re-register as a driver and join the session again. Now, when it comes to picking a car for endurance races, it's not always the fastest car that is the right option for an endurance race. Yes, fastest will help you get to the pointy end of the standings board, but your idea is to make it to the end of the race. And whilst you may be able to drive a fast car over a few laps rapid, how does that car feel over an entire stint? How does it feel after 30 laps on those tires trying to do the fastest lap time you've ever done? This is where things like practicing in the cars that you own in a multitude of sessions can really help determine what car would be better fit for you. iRacing will release a balance of performance usually a week prior to the event, and then sometimes they refine it as well. So you want to keep an eye on this, but don't just follow what the fastest car is, because that might not be the best option for your team. For example, last year's the 2023 Spa 24-hour race, our team was pretty convinced that we were going to use the Porsche until we got to almost a week before the event. And the set that we were using through the fast left-hander Blanchimont, you could make it work, but there was a lot of times we were losing it because the high speed, it was just running a very low wing. Now we could have upped the wing, but also we're not too well versed in how setups work. That made us significantly slower in other areas of the track. So it was very important that we made the decision to switch to another car because we could be more consistent and relatively close to the pace that we were in the Porsche. Maybe not completely outright as fast, but still in the long term, consistency is always going to be the better of the two options. The second part is to Endurance 101 is build a great team. Now, when I say this, I mean, most of the time, you're just going to get some buddies in and you're all going to drive to the best of your ability, and there's nothing wrong with that. You should be selective about who you pick and when you put them in the car and all that kind of stuff. So you should try and find people that you are relatively similar pace with, or even sometimes a little bit faster, that can help you learn to, little tips and tricks as you sort of practice together. That's super important to always be progressing your knowledge, and having someone who's a slightly better driver can definitely help there. And also, as part of the great team thing, if you're doing something like a 24-hour race, it does help a lot if you've got people in different time zones. So for the 24-hour last year, we had 2 people in Australia, myself and one other person, and 2 people in the States. So we could split the times, and we weren't having to wake up during the middle of the night to do stints when we're half tired. We could do basically almost all day Saturday, and then the US guys took over and did the night time in Australia. So different time zones can help a lot in terms of fatigue and just making sure that you're in the right frame of mind when you're actually in the car. Make sure you have Discord and you're using the voice chat feature. Jump on a call with all your buddies and just make sure that all works prior to getting into a race and then realizing that it might not work. I know I had a similar issue with Bathurst 12-hour last year where my Discord just completely shut down and I couldn't hear anything on the radio. So yeah, make sure Discord works before you jump into a race. This one is pretty obvious, but practice. I cannot stress this enough. Practice, 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 practice. Leading up to an endurance race, I like to do a lot of laps. Now, I'm not saying that the way I do it is right. I just like to be as prepared as possible going into a race where I know that I'm going to be possibly doing upwards of 6 hours of driving. Leading up to the race, I'll do hundreds of laps, trying to just absolutely nail every lap with muscle memory perfection. When I say practice, I mean do a full stint practice. Go out there with endurance fuel in a hosted session or the official race sessions, which obviously only happen a week before the race. Go out there, full fuel, do an entire stint until the fuel runs out and you have to come into the pits again. Do that at least once. Otherwise, you will not be prepared for this race. Secondly, do some race practice. Now, this doesn't have to be official races leading up to the endurance race. You could do AI races. AI races are a fantastic way to get familiar with people on the track and not always having the perfect line. Hot lapping is never going to get you the experience you need in an endurance race. Thirdly, make sure that you have experience as a spotter. Jump into a session with one of your teammates and spot them so that you know you've got your camera set up right, that you can see enough on the track and that you can see what's going on. You can identify what to do in the situation because they're relying on you to make calls like this. And while you're on the spotter thing, make sure you know how to become a crew chief and you can change fuel, make sure the tires are ticked, all of that kind of stuff. Don't forget your windshield tear off. And lastly, if you're practicing, make sure you practice pit lane entry and pit lane exit. These can be massive in terms of time. In a 24-hour race, there can be over 20 pit stops. And if you can gain just 3 or 4 seconds in each of them, that's massive over a 24-hour period. Make sure you practice that, make sure you hit your line, be a little bit conservative, but make sure you know how to enter those pits and make sure you know how to exit those pits. This is going to get a little bit complicated, but for beginners to endurance racing, go out there, drive as far as you can on that tank of fuel, come in, fill it up, put tires on. If you need a driver swap, do a driver swap, get back out there, do it again until the end of the race. Your last pit stop, you'll have to work out how much you need, but with a good fuel calculator like iOverlay or CAPS, you'll be able to nail it on that last stop. On the flip side to that, if you're a little bit more advanced and you're looking to get the most out of these endurance, you need to do a little bit of practice. You need to do a little bit of testing on push laps versus fuel saving laps and whether or not it's worth you fuel saving rather than going at full pace the entire race. With fuel saving laps, you're reducing your input. So you may be driving at say 95% instead of 100%, which then can lean into a little bit of that endurance strategy, which is, being consistent, just making sure you hit your marks. Doesn't have to be terribly fast, but that can lean into that. And by doing that, you can also save a little bit of tires. Just depends. You need to work out if it's worth fuel saving or it's worth pushing the entire time. Now, if you fuel save and you can go longer on a stint, then you can then eliminate some pit stops towards the end of the race. So it's like a couple of minutes saved. However, if for the majority of the race, you're going half a second, sometimes a second slower just to fuel save to try and get that extra, you're actually not gaining any time by losing the pit stops because you're trying to save fuel. You're actually going slower. These are the things you need to test. Do a push, do 10 push laps, do 10 fuel save laps. Get the numbers, get the fuel numbers, get the lap times, put them all in a sheet. Understand that over time, which one is going to be better. We did this in the Daytona 24 where we pushed it an extra 2 laps every stint. And initially we thought, that's great, we're going to get rid of like 2, I think we got rid of 2 full pit stops at the end. But however, what we didn't realize is that we were probably on average going half a second slower than what we could have gone. So I actually think that in that instance, we weren't going fast enough to fuel save. And so instead of fuel saving, we probably should have just pushed the entire time. These are the things you need to work out. It's why it's good to have stint calculators. Then you can put in the fuel numbers. That stint calculator Google Sheet has the option to do your fuel burn, and then it's got like a few extra, numbers to go. If you hit this number, you'll do this many pit stops. So it's always great to have that kind of stuff. Pretty much doesn't matter what it is. You're taking tires. It's almost never worth not taking tires. It used to be when they used to do fuel and then tires, but now that fuel and tires are done at the same time, it's almost not worth not going out on new tires. There are benefits to reducing the amount of wear on the tires, as you drive through your stint. Burning up the tires is never a good idea. You're going to lose pace by doing that. So being kind to them can definitely help you, but you're still going to change them when you come in. When you come into the pit stop, you're doing full fuel, all 4 tires, windshield tear off, maybe a driver swap. Until probably the last one, that's when you need to work out whether or not it's worth doing tires. Say if you've got a splash and dash that you've got to do at the end of the race, 9 times out of the 10, you'll probably be able to get away with the tires that you've used from the previous stint. But just double check that your tire wear is not ridiculously crazy. Watkins Glen 6 hour last year, the tire wear was insane, and we had to really be careful on the tires because at least once we came into the pits with a meatball because one of the tires was at 0%. So hot temperatures will affect that significantly. The biggest tip I can give you here when you're driving as either a faster class or a slower class in a multi-class race, even single class races will have faster and slower people, lapped cars, all that stuff. The biggest tip I can give you, be predictable. Be consistent and be patient. I can't stress that enough. They're the 3 main things. Be predictable. Pick the same line. Don't make quick, sharp movements. They're never going to help anyone ever. Don't quickly move off the race line, especially if there's a faster car coming. Just stick on your race line. It is the faster car that should go around the slower cars at all times. So the slower car just needs to stick on its line. The only thing you need to be careful of as well is braking market differences. So if you're in 2 different classes, be aware that those classes will probably brake at a different point to you. But even slower cars in the same class might just have a slightly different braking marker than you. So just be cautious of that. Now, I know I haven't covered everything. There's probably a multitude of things that I've missed, but let me know in the comments below. If there's anything I've missed, please let me know. I'll answer any questions you have in the comments. Thank you very much, guys. Take it easy. If it's easy, take it.